Cuomo announced today that they're going to be, I think, attempting to sue the U.S. government over the 89 people that were undercounted that ended up with the loss of New York's seat. The loss of New York seat was anticipated, and I think if people had to guess,
way to deflect blame, Cuomo. Honestly.
Well, yes, but addressing the larger point, what's your sense, Brandon, in terms of like, I'm not surprised that birth rates have slowed, but I'm also skeptical that we got a proper count this year between COVID and the Trump administration. And I'm not sure that this is a trend that's going to continue. I don't think it's necessarily a bad trend, at least in the short term, to be having less people in the country, who are born. But what's your sense?
Well, I mean, I think people have been sort of sounding the horn for declining birth rates in America for as long as we've had immigration and, let's be honest, Black people being allowed to vote in the country. And so while birth rate might be declining in this country among certain populations, we have an influx of immigrants from other countries who we don't, want to allow in, as people will consistently remind, which people should be consistently reminded of. But on the other hand, I think that you can, even if we can't point to specific data based on the census about declining birth rates, see in just people, and you can see in people of my generation an anxiety about having kids and bringing children into this world. And I think that you get this kind of demographic sort of anxiety amongst people without any real desire to give the sort of safety net that makes having kids a palatable, experience for people, right? Much less people being able to take care of themselves in this sort of state. In terms of the reliability of the census, I mean, with people moving around for COVID-19, moving from New York and other metropolitan areas to, places where even if they weren't just like moving as like a business, moving from like, hey, we're a hedge fund who wants to have meetings, so we're going to move to Florida. So we're going to have a whole new, hub office in Palm Beach so we can still have meetings. Just people moving to the suburbs, right? People moving to the suburbs with their family and just not being bothered to fill out census information. Like, as somebody who was in New York during the sort of height of the first wave, when people were leaving, that was when they were doing the census too.
Right. There's a lot of people who left New York state. They went back to their family homes or something like that.
I remember doing the census and thinking, like, it's amazing I'm doing this and I'm proud of myself for doing this. And I don't think a lot of other people are going to be doing this in this circumstance.
Well, I mean, Cuomo did not push for it. I mean, that was like, I think this criticism is rightful, but I just want to touch on Brandon's point because I think it's so key. I mean, when you get the older generation criticizing millennials or whatever for not buying homes in addition to not having children, and the answer is right in front of everybody. It's that the average person of our age, I'm forgetting the exact figures, but it's around $30,000 in student loan debt for people that went to college. And so that's an albatross. People aren't buying homes and they're not having kids because they have to worry financially for many, many years going forward about that debt. It's hampering things. And I think that's can't be understated,
Yeah, I think there's far more pressure on families. You see people in your generation delaying getting married and having children, and I think there's also a decent. I don't have any data on this, but I would imagine there is at least some factor. Is people are worried about bringing children into this world because of climate change, and all of those things combine, I would imagine, to, suppress the birth rate. I don't know how dramatic it's going to be. I did an interview with, just sort of, this is tangential, with a guy named Dan Bauk, who apparently used to teach Brendan. Apparently Brendan took a lot of classes with this guy. Sometimes that's what you do. You find a professor who's going to give you a good grade, and then you stick with that person and ride them through your whole college career. But he was talking about the apportionment process, and apparently the minimum representation you can have in this country is, or I should say the maximum amount of representation is one representative for 30,000 people. That's the maximum amount of representation you're allowed. There is no minimum. So we now have something like 700,000 people represented by one person. They stopped up until 1920. Congress would grow every time there was a new census. I mean, we have a constitutionally mandated census, right? And we do that for one reason, essentially. I mean, there's ancillary benefits we get from it, but there's one reason. It is to make sure that we're providing adequate representation. And the primary vehicle for that representation is through Congress. And we stopped expanding Congress 100 years ago when our population was 1/3 the size it is today. So if we were to have maintained essentially the ratio, we should have 1,300 members of Congress at this point. No, that's a crazy stat. Yeah, it's nuts.